Welcome, my friend, to Next Level Change Success. I'm Therese Perez, a change strategist and practitioner with over 20 years of experience designing and delivering impactful change programs across various industries. In this podcast, I share real-world practical strategies to help you create and deliver positive change experiences, whether you're a leader, practitioner, or someone looking to bring new ways of working to life. In today's fast-paced world, change is constant. Here we focus on how you can put people at the centre of your change strategy, because people with a sense of purpose are the most important link in driving performance. So if you're ready to create meaningful change and achieve all the success that comes with it, keep listening. Together, let's change the conversation and take it to the next level. Hello. Welcome to another episode of Next Level Change Success. My name is Therese Perez and I'm the founder of myvirtualchangemanager.com. I would like to acknowledge that I am recording on Tharawal country today and pay my respects to the traditional owners and custodians on the land on which I am recording, and to elders both past, present and emerging. Today we're talking about change management strategy. What makes a good change management strategy? Actually, probably what's in it in the first place, and I'll cover that off. And when do you need a strategy versus needing just a change plan? So this comes down a little bit to the size of the impact of your change, and when you're actually heading more towards a transformational change, so enterprise-wide, something that is fundamentally going to change the way the organization works. So even if you're looking at, say, a risk and compliance program, it makes sense that you do create a strategy first and table that. Now, there'll be two things which determine whether you go to the effort of doing this. One is whether the organization is mature enough to read it, invest in it, and understand that it's a transformational change. Typically, if it is a mandated change at the CEO level, then yes, a strategy is a great starting point. Talking about the multiple streams of work, because remember, this is a transformational change, so there will be multiple streams of work that need to be delivered, how those sequence in together, and then what the change methodology is and approach is for delivering the transformation. There might be some key high-level messaging, some high-level briefings, approaches, showcases that need to happen at the outset, and that might form part of your first 3 months of the strategy as such. And then explaining that once each of the different streams is being unpacked from an impact assessment perspective, then any common areas which have multiple changes delivered to them may need to have those changes packaged together, and their timelines in which they're being delivered will need to be negotiated. So the change strategy, what would a typical change strategy cover? It's going to talk about the purpose of the change, the why of the change. It will talk about the expected and anticipated benefits of the change. It will talk about the culture aspect, the deliverables, the streams that will need to be delivered from a program, project or change perspective. It should have a high-level impact assessment undertaken so that it is anticipated around the different groups who will be impacted the most, so a comparative assessment. And then a high-level messaging and approach, at least for the first 3 months of that change, will be necessary dependent upon the timelines of deliverables and the roles that the leaders will play versus if you're going to put in place a champion network, what that might need, the time, whether it's paid or unpaid from a champion network perspective, how you're going to approach that, and the tactics that you will take. It will also require resourcing. So the change strategy will talk about the resourcing across the different streams, whether there is at this stage anticipated training support, HR support required, dependent upon whether it impacts people's roles or the structure of the organisation, dependent upon when that stream gets delivered. The risks associated with the change, so making sure that there are risks and mitigations, talking about the likelihood of those risks eventuating, so that the sponsors know exactly what is going to need focus and to be mitigated well before it comes to bear. And also making sure that, as I mentioned before, about benefits being very, very clear, and that the executive sponsors can sign off on that approach, that they're comfortable with it, they're comfortable with the story, they're comfortable with the level of regional support required, with the risk landscape that's been articulated, and the engagement framework. And certainly if there is impacted stakeholders, that they are clearly outlined, especially if they're external to the organisation, and talking about the communication rhythms, obviously, with those stakeholders, who owns the relationship. A lot of the transformational change, especially if it involves external stakeholders, that engagement framework is really, really critical to put in that change strategy. I always think about, from a change strategy perspective, that when you've delivered the program, and I do remember some of my my team members who put together the change strategy, that at the end of major program delivery, and just bearing in mind that it can be, for transformation projects or programs, a 2 to 3 year delivery timeframe. Yet in that, if you've been able to have the change lead actually retained on that program for that amount of time, because sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes boredom can get a bit set in, or change leads can change because of some prefer to start up programs but not really to see it through. But if they definitely stay on for that time frame, and I have had a team member share this with me recently, she was very grateful that I worked with her on the change strategy, or made sure that there was one, because she said it was really interesting getting to the end of the program and reviewing it and revisiting it and seeing what she thought initially and where it went. And I think that's one of those things that I really enjoy about bringing structure to change management. And I know that some people get a little bit put off in the change arena around the process, and saying that change is a process and we're too process oriented. The structure is there for a reason. All of the elements that we certainly teach in myvirtualchangemanager.com are there so that you can refer back to them, so that you can learn from it. And that is really why you have artifacts around the change. Oftentimes when you get to the end, you forget why you were doing it in the first place. If it's run for a couple of years, you reflect upon how you've evolved through the thinking in the delivery, and how you might have adapted through that process. And you'll forget about that when you get to the end if you haven't got those reference documents up front. And a change strategy is also really good to table at a steerco, to actually have the sponsors review it, pick it apart, be comfortable with it, have it revised, have it signed off. That's critical, because it means they've got their skin in the game, that they're across it, that they're behind it, and having a document that outlines that they can pick apart. And I think that's fine if a CEO or if a senior executive, a general manager, anyone really challenges what you've put on the page. That is a good thing. First of all, because they're engaged, so they're engaged enough to question. Then also they're conscious about what they're signing up to. And once again, when you've revisited that strategy at the end, you're taking that back to the steerco around, this is where we thought we'd be, this is what we delivered, this is what we found when we delivered it, and you get that feedback. Such a really great thing to reflect upon. It's a really great thing to experience, and I'm always happy when I have that reflected back to me, because I am not necessarily pedantic, but definitely if it's a transformational change, it's really important to get that clarity up front, and also to get that feedback on resourcing levels up front, so that everyone is committed to it and that it's constantly challenged and revisited through the actual delivery. I think that's a great thing. It's very commercial. It's how it should be. and that you can also then play back the value that change and the valuable role that change has played in that whole trajectory of delivery. So a change strategy, you implement one when it's transformational. If you have got an operational change, you wouldn't deliver a change strategy as such. You might deliver a change overview, a plan on a page, just to give the initial thinking, but then you're really focused on the change plan and the tactics and the deliverables that you have, and making sure they are on time and ensuring that you've got your measures in place. It's more operational, and you might contribute change risks to the project side of things on an operational change, and you integrate your change conversation with the project. When you hit transformational change, you have more of a separate conversation specifically on change versus the project side. They will talk to the project aspects, but certainly there'll be more interest from a change perspective, and that often happens, and it should happen if it's transformational. There should be more focus on change and how that works. You might also have a change advisory board, so a CAB, that's what we call it, short acronym, or you might have it just as a change reference group from a transformation perspective, merely because it's so much change going on. And you might have business as usual attendees, like the head of corporate communications, for example, so that they can link in the business as usual activities onto that plan. And so you're leveraging existing channels where you can versus creating bespoke channels yourself. They're the reason why you have really robust change governance as well. So it's not just the strategy. You would assume that in that strategy you are also talking about the change governance and how you are going to be working across the organisation. I talked about resourcing before, and I just want to note that that also includes any dependency that you have on business as usual resource. So your standard comms channels, for example, or your standard marketing channels. You don't want to create bespoke or unique channels just for your change if you can avoid it. You should be lining up with the existing channels if they're effective, and it's given priority around your communication because it is transformational and it should be the most important thing on people's minds at different times. So a couple of things there then to highlight, and I hope that helps you the next time that you're looking to develop a change strategy. There isn't a change strategy one size fits all. And it's important to note the change strategy for remediation is different to a change strategy for an operating model review versus a change strategy for a major core system implementation and rollout, or a new supplier framework that's coming into play, or new suppliers and new supplier agreements coming on board. So every change strategy will be different. There can be blueprints for them, and we're working on some at the moment in my virtual change manager so that people can just download, so that if you had a particular change that you really want to focus on, you could just download that particular blueprint, use that as a starting point, and then build from there. But they are definitely unique, and there's a whole bunch of experience behind each of them that we integrate into ours that I think add higher value. But you shouldn't be rinse and repeating a change strategy. The outline you can, but the content itself will be quite unique to that particular change. Just to clear that up. Okay, so I hope you found this useful around what's a change strategy versus also what's a change plan. The final thing to talk about is what's a change strategy versus what's a change plan. And so a change strategy typically is at the commencement of the initiative. It's created so that clarity is provided around what's in scope for change, what's being delivered, how you're going to approach it. As I said, resourcing, risks, benefits, how that's going to be covered, how the governance is going to work within the change space. When you go into then the change and comms plan for each of the streams, they would have a separate change plan that is very specific and tactical. It has been created from a detailed impact assessment, so very intense and very detailed understanding of the impacts of the change across the organisation. It can then backfeed into the change strategy again if something's been underestimated or if it's been underestimated. It can have a different version control on that change strategy and updated off the back of that detailed impact assessment if you have the time. Often you don't have the luxury of time for that. But the benefits should always be ratified and revisited and monitored throughout any project or program. So I would expect that would be revisited if the impacts are quite significant and then the benefits are impacted as a result of that. So different levels of understanding on the change strategy versus the change plan. And it's worth highlighting that different level of detail, different areas covered, some the same, such as risk, definitely stream-related benefits. Impacted audiences will be different. Key messages will be different. The governance won't need to be covered because the governance has been covered in the change strategy. And the different stream will have a seat on that governance committee, no doubt. So there's not a need to repeat that information. So very unique, the change plan to that stream. Change strategy is the culmination of all streams of work within that transformation. If it's not a transformational change or transformational level change, as I mentioned before, if it's an operational change, just a change plan. And I say just a change plan as though it's easy. You're going to be doing your impact assessment, create the change plan, get that high level narrative happening, deep dive onto it the closer you get to getting your pre-go live activities happening and identifying whether there's any capability uplift sits within the stream. And then you deliver. And the rest will be eventually history, hopefully good history. I hope you've got some value from this episode. And if you have any questions, come to myvirtualchangemanager.com. You can also find me on YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out. I always love to chat with listeners. And if you have a certain topic you want me to cover, definitely reach out. And I will see you next week. Have a great day. And remember that change matters because your people matter. Hi, it's Therese here again. I just wanted to mention that we have the Change Intelligence webinar series happening this year, and you don't want to miss out on any of the topics that we're going to cover. It's a live webinar series talking about change resilience, change frameworks, connected thinking, how you can change your mindset and the mindset of others, behavioural change and what that can offer. If you don't want to miss out, then come to myvirtualchangemanager.com. Just simply register and we'll let you know when the next webinars are happening so that you can come along. Spaces are limited, so be sure to jump across and register as soon as you can, and you'll see some of the topics that we're going to cover. I hope to see you there and to continue to work with you to create positive change experiences.